simple, but it doesn't start with force. It starts with awareness. The next time the pressure rises, don't run from it. Instead, notice it, give it a name. Watch it carefully. Most of the time, it's not about fixing what you feel, it's about understanding where it's coming from. Something as simple as sitting with the feeling, even for a few minutes, changes your relationship with it. You don't need to rush to change it, you just need to stop running from it. That's the beginning of emotional discipline, not acting like everything's fine, but also not letting every feeling push you around. Real discipline isn't cold, it's calm, it gives you options. And the more you practice it, the clearer everything becomes. You stop being ruled by emotion, and you start leading with clarity. And when clarity enters, better decisions follow. This is where the ripple effect begins. Emotional instability doesn't just affect your mood, it shapes your money. Many financial mistakes don't come from lack of knowledge. They come from emotional chaos, the wrong purchase at the wrong time, the quick fix you didn't think through, not because you needed something, but because you needed to feel something. That pair of shoes, that latest gadget, the delicious food you didn't even want, expensive night out that felt hollow by morning. None of it was really about the thing, it was about the moment. You were tired, you were restless, you were unsure of yourself. The purchase became a distraction, a soft bandage over a deeper discomfort. The problem most of the time isn't the spending, it's the emotional state behind it. That's the part most people don't notice, but that's the part that shapes everything else. Plato once said the first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself. And that includes the part of you that keeps chasing comfort instead of learning to sit with discomfort. Money decisions made in a place of instability are rarely good ones. People don't invest wisely when they feel scared. They don't save when they feel emotionally drained. To stir your fear, to nudge your boredom, and if you're emotionally ungrounded, you'll spend not out of desire but out of imbalance. You'll call it a reward, but it's really a reaction. You'll call it self-care, but it's really self-avoidance. You'll call it treating yourself, but what you're really trying to treat is the tension inside. But this cycle doesn't have to continue. There's another way. You can pause before you purchase. You can breathe before you swipe. You can feel the urge rising and still decide not to act on it. That's not restriction, that's direction, that's power. You don't reclaim control by cutting joy out of your life. You do it by choosing joy that aligns with who you are, not joy that's forced by a moment of emotional weakness. You start to tell the difference between purchases that build your life and ones that drain it. You learn when you're investing in your future and when you're just trying to numb your present. When your emotions are balanced, your relationship with money changes. You stop chasing what sparkles. You stop needing things to validate you. You stop spending to be noticed. Instead, you start spending with intention, with purpose, with inner peace as the guide, not impulse. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living, but in today's world, it's the unexamined impulse that does the most damage. One small decision made from the wrong emotional state can ripple out weeks for months, and the damage isn't just financial, it's mental. It reinforces a pattern. I feel bad, so I buy. I feel empty, so I spend. I feel restless, so I consume. You don't need to cut yourself off from everything. You just need to understand what your decisions are really trying to solve. Are they building your foundation or just filling a hole? Because the truth is, no purchase can fix how you feel. If you're disconnected from yourself, the item might arrive, but the emptiness stays. But the good news, you can rewire it. You can choose differently. You can slow down. You can listen to what your body is really asking for. You can create space between the feeling and the action, and in that space, your power returns. Not because you denied yourself, but because you finally decided to stop running. Socrates taught that the unexamined life is not worth living, but there's something else just as dangerous, the unexamined impulse, especially when it comes to money, because every unexamined impulse is a seed of regret, waiting to grow. It doesn't always show up immediately. Sometimes it takes the shape of debt. Sometimes it creeps in as dissatisfaction, but eventually it makes itself known. This isn't about being rigid. It's not about depriving yourself. It's about becoming rooted. You don't have to deny yourself the things you want, but you do need to understand why you want them. You need to know what part of you is reaching out with your wallet, whether you're building your future or buying a moment of relief. Whether you're aligning with your purpose or just distracting yourself from your discomfort, the shine fades, the package gets opened, and if your inner world hasn't changed, you're left with the same ache, just with a little less money. But when you start doing the real work, the inner work, things shift. You don't just spend less, you spend better. You stop looking for things to complete. You stop using money as a substitute for meaning. Your spending becomes a reflection of your values instead of your emotions. You begin to invest in what makes you grow, not just what makes you feel better for 5 minutes, and you walk into spaces already full, so you don't need to prove anything to anyone. That kind of wholeness can't be bought. It's earned through discipline, through silence, through consistent choices made from presence, not performance, from intention, not impulse. The world won't tell you this. It will sell you the opposite. It will reward your reaction, your distraction, your emotional spending. It will push messages like treat yourself, you deserve this, buy now, figure it out later. But dopamine has debt, that quick hit of pleasure. That's how addiction begins. Not always with drugs or alcohol, but with behavior that feels harmless because everyone else is doing it too. Society has normalized reactive spending. You had a hard day, buy something you feel overlooked. Spend big, you're tired, unsure, unmotivated. Retail therapy, but this kind of therapy is a short-term fix. It's a band-aid over something deeper. The relief fades quickly, but the emptiness that tends to linger. Carl Jung said, people don't have ideas. Ideas have people, and one of the most powerful ideas people live under today is that your value can be bought, or at least displayed, that in order to feel worthy you must own something, that in order to belong you must show that you belong. And this idea, it owns people. It shapes how they spend, how they compare, and how they define themselves. But money, like words, is power. And just like words, most people don't use it to strengthen themselves. They use it to be seen, to be admired, to feel significant, not because they truly want the thing, but because they want to feel something, respected, validated, in control. Plato once said the measure of a man is what he does with power, and money is power. So the way you handle it reveals who's really in charge, you or your impulses. If you spend to fortify your life, you're using money as a tool. If you spend to impress, you're using it as a mask. Every dollar you spend tells a story, not just about your tastes, but about your priorities, your character, your discipline. Are you buying to build or buying to broadcast? One leads to peace, the other leads to noise, dressed up as confidence. Sometimes the broadcast is subtle, a luxury item you can't really afford, but you post it anyway, a dinner you didn't budget for but you wanted the photo, a designer piece that wasn't for your joy but for your image. That's not empowerment. It's emotional outsourcing, using purchase to say what you haven't figured out how to say on your own. Eventually the performance ends, audience moves on, the post gets buried, and you're left with yourself. Same emotions, same insecurities. Only now there's a receipt attached. That's the price of emotional spending, temporary validation, long-term cost. Aristotle believed in eudaimonia, a life of flourishing not through indulgence but through purpose and virtue, true happiness. wasn't found in excess, but in excellence, the kind that comes from knowing who you are and living in alignment with it. So the real test isn't whether you can afford something, it's whether the purchase reflects the person you're becoming. And if it doesn't, if it's just another attempt to fill a gap inside yourself that can't be filled with things, then no price tag will ever feel worth it. Eventually the applause dies down, the likes stop rolling and the high disappears, and the deeper ache returns, untouched, unchanged. That's the moment where most people buy again. But it can also be the moment where something different happens, where you pause, where you observe, where you choose to stop pouring your power into things that don't return it, because financial freedom isn't just about income, about internal stability. It's not about having more, it's about needing less. That's where your real strength begins. Aristotle believed in the concept of eudaimonia, a kind of flourishing that doesn't come from pleasure, but from purpose. He taught that real happiness isn't found in indulgence, but in disciplined action that aligns with your higher self. That's why the way we spend matters, because our spending either reflects who we're becoming or who we're trying to impress. And often it's not even about impressing people who matter, it's usually for strangers or worse, people who aren't even paying attention. We spend our peace chasing approval in a race. Nobody else is watching. We trade our internal alignment for a moment of external attention, and that's a trade that always ends in loss. The shift begins with a simple pause, a new reflex. It's peace, and peace doesn't come in packages. It comes from self-respect, from self-awareness, from knowing you had the impulse and didn't follow it. That kind of restraint builds something stronger than satisfaction. It builds trust in yourself. It builds confidence, not the kind that comes from having, it's the kind that comes from holding. Socrates once said, "He who is not contented with what he has would not be contented with what he would like to have." If you aren't grounded in what you already are, no pure chase will ever fill that space. It might give you a quick lift, but it won't build the mindset that sustains real peace. And without that mindset, even a full bank account can feel empty. Financial discipline isn't about being stingy, it's about being deliberate. It's knowing that your worth isn't, but that change everything over time. Every dollar you spend is shaping something, either your future or your facade. You're either planting seeds for growth or scattering your energy on temporary highs. The truth is, no amount of shopping will make you feel like enough if you haven't decided you already are. And that kind of belief, that grounded, silent knowing of your worth, can't be bought. It must be built through awareness, through discipline, through the quiet choice to stop letting the world spend your power for you. Each time you resist a reflex purchase, you reclaim a piece of your energy. Every time you prioritize your values over your urges, you move closer to freedom. And that freedom, it's not loud, but it's life-changing. Underneath all of it, the way you talk, the way you feel, the way you spend lives, the way you think. Your mind is the soil everything else grows from, and most people leave it completely unguarded. They allow any thought, fear, or belief to take root. No filter, no awareness, no protection, just noise masquerading as truth. Your mind isn't a dumping ground, it's a control center. You won't notice the difference. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what happens. When you let your mind go unexamined, you start reacting to fears that aren't yours. You live out patterns you never agreed to. You follow stories that were planted by others, your upbringing, your culture, your past pain, without stopping to edit the script. Silence changes that, not silence as in muting the world, but silence as in meeting yourself, sitting with your thoughts without obeying them, watching them come and go, learning which ones serve you and which ones don't. that stillness, that awareness, is the beginning of reclaiming your mind. But stillness isn't easy. It reveals things. It shows you the patterns you buried under noise. It makes you confront the discomfort you drowned in distractions. But that discomfort, that's the beginning of clarity. That's where real change starts. Plato said the first and best victory is to conquer self, and the battlefield is your own mind. Because if you can't sit with your breath without checking your phone, if you can't feel peace without external validation, if silence makes you spiral, then you're not free. That's not calm. It's dependence. Freedom starts when you stop reacting to every thought, when you catch a pattern before it runs you, when you create just enough space between stimulus and response. Choose something better. That tiny space, that split second of observation, is where your power lives. You don't need to believe every thought you think. You don't need to follow every story your mind tells. Not to suppress it, but to examine it. You start to separate signal from noise. You become a witness to your thoughts, not a slave to them. And the more you observe without jumping in, the more space you create between what you feel and how you respond. That space, that split second of awareness, where your power lives. The unobserved mind is not worth following. You can set goals, chase dreams, build plans. But if your mind is chaotic, you'll sabotage every step. You'll talk yourself out of opportunity. You'll overthink progress. You'll retreat from discomfort, not because the world is against you, but because your own thoughts made it feel that way. And here's the part no one wants to admit. No amount of success on the outside will save you from disorder on the inside. Loud or reactive, because in the absence of awareness the only voice you hear is the one yelling the loudest, and that voice is usually fear. That's what keeps us trapped. Not just the thoughts themselves, but the way we cling to them. We replay the moments that made us feel small. We carry memories of flaky, like proof. We rewatch conversations that are long over, rewriting them in our minds. To soften the pain, we create worst-case scenarios and then live in them like they already happened. It's not because danger is everywhere. It's because the brain is trying to protect us, and in its effort to prepare us for pain, it begins to expect it all the time, even in peace. That's how anxiety grows, not because something bad is happening, but because we've been rehearsing it in our heads for so long that our nervous system believes already has. This is why mental training matters, just like physical discipline. It requires consistency, repetition, intention. You start by noticing the patterns. The thought that shows up when you're tired. The belief that arrives when you fail. The story you hear in the quiet when no one's watching. Then you name it. You look it in the eye, not to fight it, but to understand it. You stop treating every thought like truth. You start editing your inner dialogue instead of obeying it, because the moment you're dead, mine becomes yours again. When you stop feeding every doubt, every fear, every story you never chose, you create room for something else. Clarity. You stop reacting, you stop chasing, you stop spinning in loops that go nowhere. Your decisions sharpen, your presence deepens, your focus cuts through noise, and you finally begin to live, not by momentum or panic, but by choice. That's when life begins to shift, not because the world changed, but because you got quiet enough to see clearly, and in that stillness, deeper truth reveals itself. One that's been there all along. You don't need to control the world, you only need to command your mind. Once you do that, nothing outside of you can ever own you again. Master your mouth, your mood, your money, and your mind, and the world no longer pulls you out of alignment, because you're finally anchored within. That's the shift. Quiet, but undeniable. When your inner world is steady, the outer one begins to move with respect. If this message spoke to you, there's another one waiting right there on your screen. Watch it next. Let it take you deeper. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal, where clarity replaces chaos and silence becomes strength.